Hi, Geshe.
Hi,
Hi.
Shir.
Hello, everyone. Thank you all for joining. So, thank you very much, Geshe, for teaching us these really precious teachings. I want to remind everyone that if you have questions or if you want to join the WhatsApp group,
Hi,
you can
Shir.
contact me in the email I pasted here now in the chat. And I also want to remind everyone that this class is all done voluntary. Um, so you have the option to practice Dana and to be part of making this thing happen, and of course also to support our wonderful teacher that is teaching us here great wisdom week after week. So you have also the details for the Dana in the chat. So thank you, and Geshema, stage is yours.
All right. Well, first of all, welcome back for another class on entry to the middle way. And as usual, we start with generating the right motivation, starting with some breathing meditation, and then I'll guide you through the meditation. And now visualize in the space in front of you Buddha Shakyamuni, who's the embodiment of the great awakened qualities such as great compassion, wisdom, skillful means, and so forth. Who appears in the form of a fully ordained monk, wearing saffron colored robes, seated in the lotus position, and serving as our inspiration. Our refuge and guide on the path. And also he's inseparable from your personal Lama. Or your personal Lamas. Surrounding the Buddha, all the great masters of the different traditions, the Indian masters, the Tibetan masters, and if you can also all the great masters of the Pali tradition, and of the Sanskrit tradition of China, Japan, and so forth. Even if you can't visualize each one of them clearly, just get a sense of their presence. And remember, they also are inseparable and of one nature with your own Lama or your own Lamas. And then surrounding us and surrounding this visualization of all sentient beings. Who, due to their basic misapprehension, experience a vast variety of different afflictive emotions, and resulting from those, the various kinds of sufferings. And then remembering that we're not that different, that they have this basic Buddha nature, potential to remove all their wrong views and all their afflictive emotions. Generate affectionate love that is a feeling of closeness and warmth. A type of affection that accepts these beings for who they are. With all their faults and limitations. And this mind then turns into an affection that wishes for all these sentient beings to be free from their sufferings and the causes of those different sufferings. And likewise into the wish, may I be able to free them from their sufferings and its causes. And in that way, we generate great compassion. And this great compassion then becomes the special altruistic attitude. That is the determination. I will, no matter how long it takes, no matter the hardships involved, I will free all sentient beings from their sufferings and the causes of their suffering. But since realistically I can only accomplish this if I become enlightened myself, therefore regenerate bodhicitta, the mind that, driven by compassion and the special altruistic attitude, wants to attain enlightenment for the welfare of all sentient beings. It is with this motivation that once again we'll study the verses by Chandrakirti, his entry into the middle way. Starting with the prayers. I go for refuge until I'm enlightened to the Buddha, the Dharma, and the Supreme Assembly. By the accumulation of merits, of practicing generosity and so forth, may I become a Buddha to benefit all sentient beings. I go for refuge until I'm enlightened to the Buddha, the Dharma, and the Supreme Assembly. By the accumulation of merits, of practicing generosity and so forth, may I become a Buddha to benefit all sentient beings. I go for refuge until I'm enlightened to the Buddha, the Dharma, and the Supreme Assembly. By the accumulation of merits, of practicing generosity and so forth, may I become a Buddha to benefit all sentient beings. May all sentient beings have happiness and the causes of happiness. May all sentient beings be free from suffering and the causes of suffering. May all sentient beings never be separated from happiness that is free from suffering. May all sentient beings abide in equanimity, free from attachment for friends and hatred for enemies. And then direct it at all the masters in front of us, who are inseparable from our Lama. Reverently I prostrate with my body, speech, and mind. I present every type of offering, actual and imagined. I declare all my negative actions accumulated since beginningless time. And rejoice in the merit of all holy and ordinary beings. Please remain until the end of cyclic existence. And turn the wheel of Dharma for living beings. I dedicate my own merits and those of others to the great enlightenment. All right, okay, great. Now, as of what to do for this coming week, of course, kind of the main thread, the main kind of aspect of what should mainly be there throughout this week. We wake up in the morning, generating the mind of enlightenment. If ideally, of course, if we go through the stages, just prescribe the stages we just went through as part of generating the motivation. First thing in the morning, last thing at night. And if we can, remember, of course, throughout the day, as many times as possible, especially in those moments when usually we just daydream. And then as part of what we talked about last time about self-compassion, self-acceptance, one aspect that's also extremely important is an attitude that unfortunately often we miss in the West. Well, it kind of depends where you come from, what country you're from, what culture you're from. One quality that goes hand in hand with compassion for ourselves, compassion for others, but in particular with an acceptance of who we are, a feeling of forgiveness, of course, forgiving ourselves for our mistakes, and not feeling frustrated about not being able to do, especially with Dharma practice, not being able to practice the way we want and so forth, is a feeling or a sense of being laid back, a calmness, serenity, a well-temperedness or even-temperedness. So in the sense that, well, definitely not stressed out, which of course at this day and age, we live in a world where, well, life is running at a very fast pace and we're quickly stressed out. But to be able to effectively practice the Dharma, this attitude of being laid back and calm and serene is extremely important. It's also one of the reasons why the Tibetans are such great candidates for practicing the Dharma, because in general, they're very laid back. That doesn't mean that they're not working hard and they're not quick in their activities and what they do, but mentally, they're very laid back. And then, of course, another people that are known for being very laid back are Australians, very laid back, which I believe is why you find so many Dharma centers and so many practitioners in Australia. Why? Because they're just naturally very calm, serene, and laid back. Now, as Germans, well, we're definitely not known for having that sense of calmness and laid backness. Israeli is definitely more laid back, but there's always room for improvement. So as part of also being gentle with ourselves, being kind to ourselves, being forgiving without falling into the extreme of laziness and just giving in to our afflictive emotions, without that, but also not generating aversion towards our own afflictive emotions. of like pushing them away, possibly suppressing them, which leads to them getting stronger. So to reduce our activities, and even if we can't do that, to generate more mindfulness and work on developing more, well, calmness, serenity, gentleness, and a sense of laid backness or being laid back. So that's for next week, to pay extra attention to this, and possibly we'll cut down on the hours you spend online, which is definitely not helping our serenity, and so forth. I'm pretty sure you know what causes extra stress, and just, do as much as you can. All right. Having said that, now going back to the text, last time we started discussing the true truth, the conventional and the ultimate truth. And before we'll continue to the way in which you can categorize the conventional truth, for instance, which really helps us to understand the true truth in general, there are a few aspects I want to mention, just because, well, Lama Tsongkhapa mentions them in his text, in this commentary called Clarifying the Intent, or Marapsel, or Clarifying the Intent, which is said to be in a beautiful, very extensive and kind of clear text, explaining the different verses and making them really accessible. So all of you have a copy of this text, and I just selected a few aspects, a few kind of explanations that I thought are important to get a full understanding of what the true truth are. Now, just to remind you, we talk of the true truth actually from the point of view of the mind. So the way I described them, for instance, last time, from the point of view of a mind that hasn't analyzed, that does not analyze, or does not engage in ultimate analysis of phenomena, a mind that perceives objects but without engaging in that kind of analysis or being influenced by that kind of analysis, those phenomena are called conventional truth. And then ultimate truth are those phenomena that are perceived or apprehended either by a mind that engages in ultimate analysis, and that it comes to some kind of result, or some kind of reaches some kind of conclusion about phenomena not being findable, this non-findability, or a mind that the analysis has preceded it and it now directly experiences that non-findability, that is the emptiness of phenomena. So that kind of mind, this difference between engaging in this analysis or not. So that's one way of looking at the true truth. But simply spoken also, well, the ultimate truth refers to the lack of inherent existence of any phenomenon. That's an ultimate truth. And any other phenomenon that is existent, any other phenomenon, therefore anything else that exists, is a conventional truth. All right, so those are two ways of prescribing the true truth, the former being actually more prevalent in that it depends on the mind, what kind of mind perceives these true truth. All right, so just to repeat it, if just in daily life we perceive things such as chairs and tables and ourselves and others, and of those minds, some of them, of course, are wrong minds, perceiving phenomena to exist or apprehending phenomena to exist inherently, although they don't exist in that way. However, not every mind, not every awareness holds on to inherent existence. There are minds that are valid in that they actually recognize something that exists, a chair, a house, a cow, ourselves, others, without adding that inherent existence. It still appears to the mind, but appearing and actually holding on to a certain mode of existence, well, there's a difference. So just apprehending things, recognizing different phenomena. Those are conventional, valid cognizers, as they're called. It's the terminology that's usually used. Kind of minds that cognize, that realize their objects, recognize their objects. That are, although they have this mistaken appearance, but are not wrong with regard to just apprehending their objects. They still know the different conventional truth. And then there are those minds that go further, that analyze the way phenomena appear to us and the way we sometimes also wrongly apprehend things, as if phenomena have this concrete, solid kind of existence, as in us calling them this, that, and the other, or thinking of them as a car or a cow or I, others, just because there are intrinsically I, others, cow, and so forth, rather than these objects being I, others, cow, etc., in dependence on the thought, this is a cow, on calling them that, kind of imputing certain concepts to them, giving them, well, labeling them in that way. This is I, this is others, and so forth. So if we analyze this way in which we perceive the world, which governs, which controls all our actions, like the sense, especially with regard to the I, seems to be so solidly there. It's the attachment to I. The attachment to I is the result of apprehending this really solid, concrete I that exists beyond mind and body and beyond the thought, I am this, I that, I see something, etc. It seems like there's this, beyond those thoughts, there's something very concrete. And my mind exaggerates this I, it blows it up. There's this exaggerating attitude, which then leads to attachment. And from there, from this self-attachment, the self-centered attitude, well, arises attachment towards mine, of course, attachment towards my happiness, my well-being, attachment towards all sorts of different phenomena. Again, based on that misapprehension, believing happiness to be in the object that triggered a happy response in my mind. And therefore, labeling, oh, pleasant person, person that gives me pleasure. And actually it's just labeled based on, or in dependence on the feeling that I have in the presence of this person. And now I believe, since I labeled this on this person, I believe there's something within this person that gives me that pleasure. That is this, there's something within this person, something intrinsic pleasant. And now I want this object. I need to be with this object because I feel my happiness is totally dependent on that. And the stronger my attachment, the less I can let go of that person. All right. So there are different grades, different degrees of attachment we usually have. But starting with that misapprehension, basic misapprehension with regard to believing phenomena to have a natural intrinsic existence, giving rise to an exaggerated sense in which those things are important, for instance. Well, with regard to the I in particular, leading to attachment to the I, attachment to other things, and from there then other afflictive emotions, aversion, jealousy, envy, arrogance, resentment, and so forth. Now, that being the case, if we look for that basic misapprehension and look for something that's truly there, inherently there, well, what we'll find is that the non-findability of that. And that non-findability of that characteristic, in other words, this absence of inherent existence, that's called emptiness. It's just the absence of something that has never been there, but which we constantly ascribe phenomena. We constantly impute onto phenomena, wrongly impute. There's a difference between correctly imputing on a valid basis of imputation, imputing cow, imputing I, others, and so forth, versus totally incorrectly imputing inherent existence. There's no valid basis for saying so. It'd be totally absurd if that was actually possible. All right. Now, emptiness is just finding that absence, not finding any intrinsic existence of the I or anything else. All right. And this is usually associated, finding this emptiness is associated with Arya beings. So Lama Tsongkhapa himself said that they're the true truth in relation to ordinary beings and the Arya beings, the noble beings, or the Arya beings being those who have realized the ultimate truth, that is emptiness, have realized it directly, have experienced it directly. So with regard to ordinary persons, they're connected more to conventional truth, and these Arya beings are more connected to ultimate truth. But what Lama Tsongkhapa stresses is he's saying that's just primarily so. That is not saying that an ordinary person who's not directly experienced emptiness cannot realize emptiness. In fact, you become an Arya and experience emptiness directly only after you've conventionally, first come to an assumption, or maybe just a doubt, or maybe things exist inherently, maybe not, maybe you doubt it for the first time. Just this doubt is set to shake cycling existence. I mean, just thinking, oh, maybe phenomena don't exist the way they appear. Maybe they don't exist inherently. And from there, it develops. It turns into a conviction, then an understanding, a conceptual understanding, and slowly through familiarity, you directly experience emptiness. Then you're an Arya being. So therefore, as an ordinary person, you can totally understand that, realize that. If you give it time, if you, accumulate a lot of merit, that's important. Purify negativities, connect with your Lama, as in, supplicating your Lama for assistance, even though it doesn't physically mean that your Lama physically assists you, as in like directly talking to you, but just this mental communication. And in that way, of course, also thinking about emptiness, reflecting on it, eventually anyone is able to realize it. Therefore, it can be an ordinary person, and even a noble one, of course, perceives conventional truth. Therefore, it's only primarily in relation to those beings. Ordinary person, more associated with conventional truth, and Arya beings primarily primarily associated with ultimate truth. So that's one thing that Lama Tsongkhapa makes clear. If you read the commentary, you'll find this explanation. All right. Now, what he also stresses is that it's important to understand that we're not saying one phenomenon is both. One single entity is both a conventional truth and an ultimate truth. I've already said that last time, but just to stress this again, if you have a phenomenon, for instance, such as a table itself is a conventional truth. And this characteristic of the table, that it doesn't exist inherently, that lack of or absence of inherent existence, that non-inherent existence of the table not existing inherently, that characteristic is its ultimate truth. Okay, so they're not the same. They're not identical. And even if you take that emptiness, that lack of inherent existence of the table, and search for the inherent existence of that emptiness, again, you won't be able to find it. And then in that case, actually the basis is an ultimate truth, and you find the ultimate truth of that ultimate truth. Therefore, it's not always for every emptiness, the basis is necessarily a conventional truth. In the case of the table, yes, the basis is the table. And based on that table, you do not find any inherent existence, which is another way of saying you find the absence of inherent existence, you find the emptiness of this table. In that case, table is the conventional truth and emptiness its ultimate truth. But you can also take an emptiness as a basis, the emptiness of the table, as I just said, and understand its emptiness. Okay. So this is, again, something Lama Tsongkhapa explains. All right. And also what he stresses is, he says again, and I said that last time, there is no third truth. There is no third truth. There's only those two. Well, one reason I gave for why there's only those two truths, one reason was, I said, well, one truth is taken from the point of view of not engaging in ultimate reality, and one truth is from the point of view of engaging in ultimate reality. And there's only those two possibilities. Either you do engage in ultimate reality or you don't. There's no third possibility. Therefore, logically, there's no third truth. But there's other ways of saying there's no third truth. So first, Lama Tsongkhapa presents a sutra. The sutra definitely presenting the suchness, and in there it says there's the conventional and likewise the ultimate truth. There's never at any time a third truth. And of course, please remember, the conventional truth is not an actual truth. It is just called a truth. It is a truth from the point of view of just an ordinary mind, from the point of view of, well, from the point of view of the misapprehension of reality. To that mind, a table exists truly, it exists in and of itself, it exists inherently. So to exist truly is the same as saying the table exists inherently. Truly, as in, like, you can find the table, you don't need a mind to perceive it, it's there in and of itself. That means it exists truly. And saying it is a true, it's a conventional truth, is that it's for in ignorance, it exists truly. As in, like, well, not only does it for that mind exist truly, but also to just ordinary minds, it appears to exist in and of itself. An ultimate truth is an actual truth. It's an actual truth from the point of view of the way it exists and the way it appears. With regard to direct perception, there is no, when you directly experience emptiness, it appears to you the way it actually exists. There is no discrepancy in terms of appearance and existence. So it's an actual truth. Therefore, you've got one actual truth, one that's called a truth. It's actually a conventional and not an actual truth. And there's no third possibility. All right. And so the reasoning that Lama Tsongkhapa here mentions is that they're mutually exclusive, in that they're direct opposites and that abide in mutual exclusion, which means if you, based on a particular phenomenon, you negate one, you automatically confirm the other. So if you realize a vase is not an ultimate truth, if you negate that mentally, you automatically confirm that the vase is a conventional truth. And if based on emptiness, you refute, you negate that emptiness is a conventional truth, you automatically understand it's an ultimate truth. So that is the way in which those two are direct opposites, such that they abide with mutual exclusion, direct opposites that abide with mutual exclusion. This is a little difficult because we have no real understanding of conventional truth and ultimate truth to really understand, to really get a sense of that. But it's easier to understand on the basis of something else. For instance, if you take permanent and impermanent. If on the basis, for instance, a table, you negate that the table is permanent, if you negate that, you automatically confirm that the table is impermanent, because there's only two possibilities. Either something changes moment by moment, which means it's impermanent, or it doesn't. So if you negate that it doesn't change moment by moment, a basis such as a table, for instance, so it does exist, okay, an existent thing such as a table, well, is not something that does not change, well, obviously has to change and has to be impermanent. So in that case, it's more obvious that impermanent and permanent are direct opposites that abide with mutual exclusion, which in other words means if you negate one aspect, then automatically you confirm the other, you establish the other. Okay, that's a little philosophical. For those of you who studied philosophy in more detail, it may make more sense. But I hope even for those who are slightly new to this, well, you get something out of this understanding, especially as explaining why these two truths are, well, exclusive. There's no other truth. Then something else that Lama Tsongkhapa also mentions, that's also really important. He says there's also a difference between realizing, knowing a conventional truth and knowing that it is a conventional truth. There's a difference. Okay? Because in order to know something is a conventional truth, you need to know that it's an object that doesn't exist the way it appears. And in order to understand that, you need to know that the way it appears as inherently existent doesn't exist. So if you know that the way it appears as inherently existent, it doesn't exist that way, well, you must have understood emptiness. Which therefore means in order to understand that something is a conventional truth, you first need to realize its ultimate nature. But you can realize a conventional truth without knowing it is one. So if I ask you, do you know conventional, like for instance, if I check, do you know conventional truth or not? If I've understood what conventional truth are, well, if you understand a table, if you realize a table, well, you actually realized, you understood, you recognized, or if you've known a conventional truth, but you don't know it is one. It's similar to knowing something that is impermanent. We know lots of things that are impermanent, but we don't necessarily know that they are impermanent. There's that difference, and Lama Tsongkhapa stresses that. Giving the example, for instance, if you look at some kind of magical illusion, he gives the example of a horse and an elephant. Someone kind of through some kind of illusion, some magician or illusionists like conjure up this horse and elephant. You actually are looking at an illusion, but you don't know it is one. So that's analogous to that example. All right. Something else Lama Tsongkhapa mentions, he gives what is the basis of the division of the true truth? What is the basis of the division? This is also a kind of a philosophical. Oops. What was that? That's a philosophical term. That's a philosophical term, the basis of division. The basis of division, for instance, if you say permanent and impermanent, that's a division. What's the basis? Well, anything that exists, whatever exists, can be divided into, well, permanent and impermanent. Well, likewise, anything that exists is either a mental phenomenon or a non-mental phenomenon, such as material phenomena and so forth. So in that way, you can divide phenomena, and you always have like a basis, and that basis is usually also the term that you use is the umbrella term for that. Okay, so existent is the umbrella term for anything that is permanent as well as impermanent. Both of those exist. Now, what is the umbrella term? What is the basis for the true truth? And Lama Tsongkhapa, what he mentions, based on the sutra called the Sutra of Father and Son's Meeting, where it says that thus the Tathagata, the Buddha, comprehends the conventional and the ultimate truth. What is to be known to is confined to this conventional and the ultimate truth alone. So what does he say? He says anything that can be known, anything that can be known correctly, anything, well, that exists actually. But he formulates it differently. He says objects of knowledge. Actually, objects of knowledge and existent are equivalent. object of knowledge, anything that exists must be an object of a valid knowing mind, and something that is not object of a valid knowing mind cannot exist. I'm not saying whatever exists has to be the object of my knowing minds. No. In general, there must be a knowing mind that knows this object, whether directly or conceptually. That is the meaning of something that exists. And actually, of course, the Buddha himself, or here, in the sutra, of course, the Buddha himself said that the basis is that which can be known. And in that way, although they're equivalent, existent and object of knowledge, it kind of brings back the attention to things that are perceived. It has to do with the mode of perception, of knowing, of apprehending things, that we talk of conventional truth and ultimate truth. Right? Because whatever is a conventional truth exists, whatever is an ultimate truth exists, and there are different minds that know a conventional truth, that know an ultimate truth. All right. And then one very important aspect that Lama Tsongkhapa mentions, that is actually also mentioned in the Heart Sutra, is the relationship between the two truths. How are they related to each other? Well, it is usually said that a conventional truth and an ultimate truth are of one nature. Remember, I talked about that before in the context of cause and effect. Are they of one nature? Are they of different natures, of a different nature? But in this context here, the true truth, it is said that they are of one nature, which means they exist at the same time, and the existence of one cannot exist without the other. So their existence is dependent on each other, and they exist simultaneously. But literally, this doesn't mean that conventional truth in general and ultimate truth in general are of one nature. That's not the meaning of this. The meaning is that a particular conventional truth and its ultimate truth, they are inseparable in that way, in that they exist together at the same time. And you can't have one without the other. They're dependent on each other. So taking the table and the lack of inherent existence of the table, well, they definitely exist together. If you have a table, you have the lack of inherent existence of the table. And if you have the lack of inherent existence of the table, you have a table. You can't have one without the other. Plus, so they exist at the same time, plus, well, you can't have one without the other. So in that explanation, both qualities are included. And then actually Lama Tsongkhapa, first he gives this quote from Nagarjuna's commentary on bodhicitta, or commentary on the awakening mind, which is independent of the conventional. So the words from Nagarjuna's texts, they are independent of the conventional. No suchness can be found. Yeah, makes sense. Without the table, you can't have the suchness, that is the emptiness. Suchness is just another word for emptiness, the actual mode of existence, final nature of the table. So the suchness of the table can only be found if you have a table. The conventional is taught to be emptiness, is taught to be empty. Form is empty, right? Conventional is taught to be empty, or actually emptiness it says, but it's the same as saying, well, it lacks inherent existence. The emptiness itself is the conventional. Form is empty, emptiness is form. In other words, well, without the emptiness of the table, you couldn't have a table. You couldn't have a table. Plus, the emptiness also depends on the table. And then it says, one does not occur without the other. One does not occur without the other. Just as being produced and impermanent. So the equivalent in the Heart Sutra is form is empty, emptiness is form. Emptiness is not other than form. Form is not other than emptiness. Right? Again, that is described. So with these words here, it says, well, on one hand, they're inseparable, but they're not identical. Though they're inseparable, the conventional truth is not the ultimate, and the ultimate is not the conventional. So they're just like being produced and being impermanent. Whatever is impermanent is produced by its own cause, whatever is produced by its own cause is impermanent, but they're not identical. It's not identical. These two are not identical, but still you can't have one without the other. If they were identical, well, they couldn't have a different meaning. Impermanent means changing moment by moment. Being produced means being produced by its own cause, so they're not identical. Therefore, with this, he kind of describes, Lama Tsongkhapa explains here, his words are literally, and this is here the translation by Geshe Thupten Jinpa, there's no suchness that is different in terms of reality from the conventional, because the conventional truths are empty of true existence, and the emptiness of true existence itself is posited on the basis of the conventional, or posited on the conventional as its basis. Then, when it says one does not occur without the other, the two lines indicate that this is so and that they observe a relationship whereby one does not occur without the other. Okay, all right. So that should do for now, well, this explanation. And then one more that when I read through it, I thought was important to share with you. One more explanation. When you read the Shantidevas, the Bodhisattva way of life, when it describes the true truth, here there's one verse that is, well, differently interpreted, and according to Lama Tsongkhapa, he interprets this verse as follows. So first, I read you the verse. The conventional and the ultimate, these are accepted to be the true truth. This is from the Bodhisattva's way of life. The ultimate is not the purview of cognition. The cognition is asserted to be conventional. Purview, what is purview? Well, it says basically the ultimate is not part of the range of experiences and thoughts. So in other words, it cannot be known. The ultimate is not something that can be cognized. The ultimate is not cognized, if you want to, or is not part of the range of experiences and thoughts. The cognition is asserted to be conventional. It's like, what? These two last lines? The ultimate cannot be known, and cognition is conventional. So there's no cognition of the ultimate truth, but the cognition is conventional. Say, what? What is he saying? Well, that cognition is conventional makes sense. Any cognition, well, that happens with a mind, and the mind is a conventional truth. So, okay, cognition is conventional. But the ultimate is not in the range of experience. In other words, you cannot cognize the ultimate. And Lama Tsongkhapa says, that's not the meaning of this. That's not literally what this means. Anyway, that would be in contradiction to what it says in the Sutra of Fathers and Sons, that it's an object of knowledge, that the true truth are an object of knowledge. The conventional, it says here, in there's another quote in that context that Lama Tsongkhapa gives, again, Sutra of Fathers and Sons, the conventional is seen by the Tathagata as the purview of the world. So the conventional, that directly connects to sentient beings' range of experiences and thoughts. Well, yeah, they're labeled by sentient beings. So actually the conventional truth is everything we label in day-to-day life. Okay? And that's what the Tathagata realizes. But even that means as in the range of experience and thoughts of the world, of just ordinary, of just non-enlightened beings. And that's all right. So therefore, and later on it's explained, it's not explained in that particular passage, but later on Lama Tsongkhapa explains that the ultimate is not realized but just an ordinary mind. So it's not in the purview of cognition, means an ordinary range of experience, just without analyzing the ultimate. No, for an ordinary person, if you just ask anyone on the street, do things, well, if you explain inherent existence, pretty sure everyone would agree, yeah, they exist inherently. So that is like the sense that phenomena exist that way. And of course, people perceive all the conventional truth, everything conventionally existent, but not the ultimate truth, because they hold on very strongly onto the opposite. All right. Okay, so that is this explanation. So according to Lama Tsongkhapa's interpretation, when Shantideva says the ultimate is not cognized, if you like, or the purview of cognition is not really cognized, he's not saying not in general, but not by an ordinary mind. It's a special type of mind. It's an ultimate mind that engages in ultimate analysis or arises as a result of that ultimate analysis, coming to the conclusion this object cannot be found. Okay, so those were a few passages. Just if you read through Lama Tsongkhapa's commentary, and it's very extensive, and not everything we can discuss as part of this this get together on Sunday evenings. But I thought these bits are really important, and I wanted to share them with you. All right. So, having said all this, it's so hard, of course, to understand the ultimate truth. So difficult to understand this. But what may help us is an explanation that Chattakirti gives now with two further verses. Two verses where he, describes actually a division of the conventional truth. How you can, initially 2 verses, and with 2 verses, he describes a division. He divides phenomena, or he describes different types of the true truth. Of course, you can divide the true truth in many different ways. The conventional truth that are permanent, that are impermanent, or what have you. But the way he divides them here, this gives us an extra understanding of the way phenomena appear to us, in that conventional truth appear in a mistaken way, are therefore sometimes called deceptive, and ultimate truth are described as non-deceptive, in that the way they appear to a mind that directly perceives them, it accords with reality. It's just the nature of the mind, the nature of the object, that an ultimate truth, when it appears to a direct experience of emptiness, does not appear in any wrong way. That is described here by this division into, the conventional truth aspects, or division of the conventional truth, helping us to understand exactly this. But I want to mention one part that is actually, not really mentioned as part of this particular outline in Lama Tsongkhapa's text, but that is still important, and I've mentioned it before, and it adds some confusion. It adds some confusion only because the words that I used are quite similar. Some of you are aware of that, heard about it before. For some of you, it may be new. So, and I've said it last time, I believe. Before I go into the division of the true truth, of the conventional truth, with this next 2 verses, one aspect I'd like to say that's a little confusing. There is a difference between saying conventional truth and conventionally existent. And there's a difference between saying ultimate truth and ultimately existent. Okay? It's not the same. Conventionally existent versus conventional truth. Ultimately existent versus ultimate truth. Why? Although you use the same words, and that's the same also in Sanskrit, it's the same in, I'm not sure in Sanskrit, to be honest. I believe it's the same in Sanskrit. I'm not sure. Maybe any of you can help me on that. If you know Sanskrit, can help me with that. Definitely it's the same word in Tibetan. It's the same word, conventional truth, Kunsup Demba, and conventionally existent, Kunsup Duyuba. Kunsup. In both cases, you can hear it's the same word, but formulated slightly differently. Although it's the same word, the words take on a different meaning. So conventionally existent means in the sense of, being merely labeled, being existent as being labeled. Conventionally existent means being merely labeled. Emptiness is also conventionally existent because it's merely labeled. But emptiness is not a conventional truth. So it's conventionally existent, but not a conventional truth. And then you have ultimately existent. Is there anything that is ultimately existent? No. Because ultimately existent means not merely labeled. It's the same as saying inherently existent, independently existent, ultimately existent. Those have the same meaning. Therefore, emptiness is an ultimate truth, but doesn't exist ultimately, because nothing can exist ultimately. So it's just confusing because you have the word ultimate, conventional in both cases. But once you remember, once you memorize this, it's easy. It'll even though with these similar terms, you won't confuse them because it's, well, expressed differently. All right. Okay, so having said all this, I didn't think I would go through this so quickly. Let me just check with you. I did cover a lot of material to make sure you've understood. Are there any questions so far? Any questions on anything I just mentioned?
Yes, please. May I?
Of course. Yes.
You said when we say emptiness of emptiness, when the phenomena we analyze is emptiness, the phenomena we analyze, is it conventional existent or ultimate? Because you said ultimate of ultimate, I think.
The ultimate truth of the ultimate truth.
It's ultimate truth of ultimate.
But I mean, there is no general ultimate truth. So if I say the ultimate truth of the ultimate truth, it sounds like the second ultimate truth. So the ultimate truth of ultimate truth. There's like a general ultimate truth. It's kind of misleading. For instance, the ultimate truth of the table. There is no general ultimate truth, right? I mean, there's the ultimate truth of this or of that and so forth. In that sense, or, well, you can say, yes, ultimate truth in general, but that's more an abstract. That's more a generality. And to be very specific, it refers to something very specific. So let's say the ultimate truth of the table. There is an ultimate truth of the ultimate truth of the table. It's the emptiness of the ultimate truth of the table. Does that ultimate truth of the table exist ultimately? No. Does the ultimate truth of the ultimate truth of the table exist ultimately? No. Does the ultimate truth of the ultimate truth of the ultimate truth of the table exist ultimately? No, because nothing exists ultimately. Everything exists conventionally. It is also just labeled. It is dependent on other factors other than itself, right? Because ultimately or inherently existent means independently existent. But how could the ultimate truth of the table, how could that exist independently? At least it depends on the table. Therefore, it exists in dependence. And again, it's labeled by the mind, ultimate truth of the table, based on the non-findability of a particular object that is also just called table. Based on that non-findability, we speak of ultimate truth of the table. So therefore, the ultimate truth of the table is merely labeled on the basis of the table and that non-findability when undergoing or when engaging in ultimate analysis. So therefore, the ultimate nature of the table also doesn't exist inherently. And we have its ultimate truth. All right? Yeah. Does that answer your question?
Yes, thank you.
Sure. All right. Any other question?
Yes. Thank you, Geshe.
Sure.
From this reasoning, I came to reason that does the enlightened mind exist without the generation of it? So the mind that generates it, and if so, can it be permanent?
The mind that generates it. What do you mean with generates it?
Well, in order for an enlightened mind to
develop,
it has to be generated from a mind.
Well, yes.
And that could be, and can that be permanent?
Can that which generates it, or the mind itself?
Well, the mind that generates it and the awakened mind, can they be permanent?
Okay, you're Eduardo, right?
Eduardo, yes.
Eduardo, okay, Eduardo.
Thank you.
All right, so Eduardo, if you think of your own mind is actually in its actual nature, I'm not talking about ultimate truth, etc. Just on a conventional level, your mind is actually, it's not in the nature of your mind to experience afflictive emotions. Anything, any hindrance, anything that you remove once you're a Buddha is not in the nature of the mind. Like mud is not in the nature of water. Okay, you can totally separate the mud out of the water. When the water is muddy, it seems that the water and the mud are inseparable, but actually you can have very pure water without the mud, because the mud is not in the nature of the water. If it was, you couldn't have water without mud. So think of your mind as similar. Your mind is like this pure water, and the mud is just there temporarily and can be removed from your mind. Any hindrance, anything that keeps you from being a Buddha is like that mud. Now you generate, in other words, your mind slowly needs to remove its own mud. Okay? It's your own mind that removes its own mud. And once that mud is removed, the mind that is free from that mud is called the enlightened mind. Okay? Now, one question that you may have is, how can something that is muddy remove the mud from itself? Well, it's not doing it independently, number one. And how can a body that is full of stiffness and cannot move, how can that turn into a flexible body? Can do that. You can transform your body that is totally stiff and full of aches and so forth through appropriate exercises. You can turn your body into a very flexible body. Similarly, this mind that you have right now, that is not in the nature of the mud, of all the afflictions that are within it, all the hindrances within it, well, through certain techniques and mental exercises, in other words, meditations and so forth, you can purify all this mud. You can remove it from your mind. You can generate. So therefore we label on the basis of this process, we call that generating the enlightened mind, which is just another way of saying removing all the balagan that's extra, removing all the, all the mud, removing all the stuff that causes you to suffer and keeps you from actualizing your actual nature. And once you removed all that, by definition, you have now the mind of a Buddha. And that mind was impermanent when it was in the process of removal, and it continues to be impermanent. So it's not static, but that doesn't mean it's like an enlightened mind one day and a non-enlightened mind the next day. That's not what it means to be impermanent. Impermanent doesn't mean you have to totally become different from moment to moment. Clean water, once it's clean and it remains clean, it still changes moment by moment, but it remains in the form of clean water. Does that make sense, Edward?
Well, taking the allegory of water, then, and we talked about it in previous lessons, there's no meaning in the water. I mean, there's no essence in the water itself.
There is no essence in the water.
There's no inherence in the water itself. Of course, the water is by itself to be removed.
Well, even with the muddy water, it never existed inherently. And now with the purified water, it doesn't exist inherently, which is why your mind doesn't exist inherently and the Buddha's mind doesn't exist inherently, but it exists conventionally. And that's enough for it to exist. In fact, it existed inherently. You could never remove the mud. You'd always be stuck with the mud because you couldn't interact with anything other than the mind. And Without that, you can't attain enlightenment, right? It needs to interact with other factors. So on a conventional basis, of course, the mind can change. It's a merely labeled mind that's a labeled muddy mind based on a certain valid basis, which becomes a merely labeled enlightened mind. Okay. But think about it. It's not, it takes some time. That's difficult. That the Buddha doesn't exist inherently, slightly more difficult than, yeah, ordinary beings, you know, they don't exist inherently. It seems easier than that. And then also permanent. Yes. Well, there are some traditions where they say the Buddha's mind is permanent, but they're not talking about the mind being permanent as in like static, as in like, not being able, you know, not being a form or being a cause of the next. As far as I understand, that's not what it means. Permanent, rather, in the sense that it can no longer change into something unenlightened. This is my limited understanding of other traditions, but definitely, according to Lama Tsongkhapa's explanation, well, definitely the mind changes nonetheless. All right. Okay, let me check in the chat. There are 2 messages. No questions.
May I?
Please, of course, Varda. Yes. Last question before we start the meditation. Please go ahead, Varda.
Something really of a layperson to make it specific in my mind.
Please, yeah.
The object of negation,
yes,
is part of the conventionally existent conventional truth. The object of negation is a part of the object which is impermanent, and this is the only thing that is ultimately analyzed.
Okay. The object of negation. All right. I'll repeat your question to make sure I understand it, right? So you are asking, is the object of negation something that is to be analyzed and that is actually a conventional truth? Are you saying that? Are you asking whether the object of negation is a conventionally existent conventional truth?
Yes, and it actually is a part of the permanent object.
Part of a permanent, when you say part of a permanent object, is it permanent? Are you asking, is it permanent?
No, it's no.
Part of a permanent, okay.
If there is an object which is permanent.
Yes.
Yeah, and the object of negation is part of the impermanent object, because this is the part that we negate and becomes ultimate truth. The water is there, and the filth is only part, is the object of negation.
Wait. Okay. There's some confusion. Edward's mud, sorry, Edward's mud, or our mud for that matter, it's not
the water. I always do that. I know I shouldn't ask questions. One second.
Okay, just a second. I think we have some technical issues. I see Geshe is connected again. Just a second.
Can you see me? Can you hear me?
Yeah.
I said to Varda, you're suddenly frozen, but it was me gone. We had some disruption. We had a lot of snow today, and I think maybe that's why the internet was quickly gone. I called my brother-in-law, and yeah, well, it's all back now. Sorry for that. So Varda, I don't know when you just...
Maybe
You're confused about the terminology. Object to be abandoned and object to be negated. The mud in our mind is to be abandoned. The mud exists. The mud are the afflictive emotions, are the wrong views, etc. Those are to be abandoned. But the object of negation, it doesn't exist. That is inherent existence. That is not conventionally existent. It's not a conventional truth. It needs to be removed.
Yes, but the if I don't take the water as an example, but if I take an object, an object, an impermanent object as an example, the way that we see it not in the right way is the object of negation, isn't it?
Well, this impermanent object itself, there's no problem with it. But giving it that characteristic of inherent existence, adding some characteristic it doesn't have, that's the problem. The object itself is not the problem. It's inherent existence, which we wrongly perceive. That's the problem.
So the inherent existence is part of the way that we see the object.
Exactly. Very good. Very good. That's it.
And
it's part of... yes.
And this part is the object of negation.
Exactly. Very good. So I'm not negating.
It's part of the whole.
It's part of the whole. Well, it's a part that has never been there.
Okay. Yeah.
Right? So I exist, but only conventionally. But I believe I exist inherently. And that's my problem. For me, the I and the inherently existent I, the conventional I and the inherently existent I are inseparable to my mind. Okay? All right, great. Okay, now it's time to do some meditation. I'm sorry for that, misfunction, but it wasn't too long, so that's all right. So let's do some meditation on the true truth. All right. So just go through what we've just learned by way of analytical meditation. So we start with some breathing to let go of any disruptive thoughts, to calm the mind. Do some breathing meditation. Whatever exists and whatever we can know is either a conventional truth or an ultimate truth. There's no other possibility. Ultimate truth is the term we use to refer to the object of the mind that searches for the inherent existence of any phenomenon, the inherent existence of the I, of the body, or of the table, and since it cannot be found, since neither the I, nor the body, nor the table, or anything else exists inherently, this non-findability of inherent existence of any type of phenomenon is called ultimate truth. The non-findability of the inherent existence of the table is the ultimate truth of the table. The non-findability of the inherent existence of the I is the ultimate truth of the I. However, it is not the I or the table or any other existent that is negated, but it's their inherent existence. Therefore, the I exists, the table exists, the body exists. Yet instead of existing independently and inherently, they exist in dependence on other factors, and therefore they exist conventionally. Since not only do they exist in dependence on other factors, they also exist in dependence on labeling. And so we divide phenomena into those that are the objects of ultimate minds, and those that are the objects of ordinary, conventional minds. Those minds that do not engage in ultimate analysis. And that perceive a wide range of of different phenomena. And what is the relationship between those two truths, conventional and ultimate truth? Well, taking the conventional truth, such as a table, although to us a table appears to exist inherently, independently, as if findable somewhere among its parts. That findability, that inherent intrinsic existence is impossible. When the mind looks for that extra mode of existence, that inherent intrinsic existence, all we find is a non-findability, a non-intrinsic existence. Thereby the ultimate truth of the table. And those two, the table and its ultimate truth, are inseparably linked. As you can't have one without the other. With both dependent on each other. Which is why the table is empty. Emptiness is the table. In other words, the table is empty of inherent existence. And it is on account of the fact that the table doesn't exist inherently that it's possible for the table to exist. Were the table to exist inherently, it couldn't possibly exist. Therefore, emptiness is the table. Emptiness enabling the existence of the table. And the same is true for the I. For the self. There is a conventional truth, the I, that exists conventionally as it's merely labeled. Yet the way it appears to our own mind is not as a merely labeled phenomenon, but it's something much more. Something very solid, concrete, and independent. Our mind goes beyond the conventional I and exaggerates its existence. And that in turn exaggerates the importance of this I. That we connect to the mind, leading to self-attachment or self-centeredness. A mind that holds the I to be more important than others. Causing other forms of attachment, other afflictions, and all our suffering. Which is why it's so important to come to understand the true truth with regard to our self and with regard to other phenomena. Now spend a few moments just focusing on whichever insight you've gained or whichever conclusion you've come to as a result of this analysis, and allow for it to sink deeper into your mind. And that's, of course, also remember why we're doing this, why we're learning about and contemplating, as well as meditating on the true truth. Doing this for the benefit of all sentient beings, in particular, with the aim to become enlightened for the welfare of all sentient beings. And let's so therefore dedicate all the virtue we've accumulated towards that goal. But at the same time, also, may whatever virtue we've accumulated also affect right now, right here, the beings of this world around us. May those who have COVID-19 recover very quickly. May Tali Lubin get better very soon, and everyone else who's unwell, mentally or physically, quickly be able to free themselves from their pain and sufferings. And may we, of course, contribute to that. And so with this in mind, let's recite the dedication prayer. May all beings everywhere, plagued by sufferings of body and mind, obtain an ocean of happiness and joy by virtue of my merits. May no living creature suffer, commit evil, or ever fall ill. May no one be afraid or belittled, with a mind weighed down by depression. May the blind see forms and the deaf hear sounds. May those whose bodies are worn with toil be restored on finding repose. May the naked find clothing, the hungry find food. May the thirsty find water and delicious drinks. May the poor find wealth, those weak with sorrow find joy. May the forlorn find hope, constant happiness and prosperity. May there be timely rains and bountiful harvests. May all medicines be effective and wholesome prayers bear fruit. May all who are sick and ill quickly be freed from their ailments. Whatever diseases there are in the world, may they never occur again. May the frightened cease to be afraid, and those bound be freed. May the powerless find power, and may people think of benefiting each other. Most importantly, for as long as space remains, for as long as sentient beings remain, until then, may I too remain to dispel the miseries of the world. Okay, thank you very much. I apologize being 10 minutes late. We'll continue, of course, next week. And please don't forget your homework, your weekly kind of task, if you like, to work on that calmness, gentleness towards yourself. And then, of course, also towards others, and generating the mind of enlightenment as often as we can. All right. Have a lovely week. And then I see you again next Sunday. Okay. Be well.
Much.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Okay.
Good night.
Bye-bye.
Thank you
Good night.
Good night.
Thank you.
Okay.
That's
Night.
Thank you, Donna friends. Good night.
Thank you.
Good night, Geshe-ma. Thank you.
Thank you.
Mm.
Thank you.